Hello, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Bethanne. Today I want to talk about The Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. And oh my gosh, this book took me for a little bit of a ride. So this is a YA young adult fantasy, and it's a retelling of the legend of King Arthur and Guinevere. And in this particular retelling, so Merlin has been banished from King Arthur's court, and Merlin has, we're not really sure who she is, a protege or a daughter who he is sending to Arthur. She's pretending to be a princess named Guinevere, and she is supposed to protect Arthur from some unknown magical threat that Merlin didn't really tell her much about. I mean, didn't tell her anything about. There's an unknown magical threat. She's the only one who can protect Arthur since he's been banished. So she is going and impersonating a 16-year-old princess to be Arthur's queen so that she's very close to him and can protect him. I was all about that premise. So that's the premise of the book. That's what we learn within the first few pages. I think that premise is fantastic. It's casting, a medieval princess fairy tale into kind of this different thing where the princess is supposed to, the queen, to be queen, is then supposed to have the role of protector for the king. I thought that was so cool. So the first, I would say at least 50% of the book, maybe up to 2/3 of the book, I actually thought were really great. It is young adult fantasy, so it's written a bit differently than adult fantasy. The world isn't as fleshed out, things like that. But I was really enjoying it, and that's my main assessment, especially for a fantasy book, is just like, what is the level of enjoyment that I'm getting out of this book? Am I excited when I have a few minutes to pick it up? Am I sad when I then have to put it down? Does my kid end up fussing at me because I didn't put it down quickly enough? That sort of thing. And so I really, really enjoyed, I would say, about the first 2/3 of the book, although towards the end of those first 2/3, I was starting to be like, oh gosh. And then the ending was not good. So maybe I'll pause there, and just in case anybody is planning to read this, you can now stop watching the video and turn away because I am going to do some spoilers. So, okay, I'm assuming if you're continuing watching this, you probably won't read this book and just want to hear me spill some tea. So anyway, okay, so then the end of the book. So there's some nice twists as we get into the second half of the book. So for example, one of the mysteries that the Guinevere imposter is investigating early on in the book is there's a mystery knight who's doing really, really well in Arthur's tournaments. Arthur has a competition where as you advance through the competition, eventually, if you fight enough of his knights and win, you're automatically a member of his court. And Guinevere is really suspicious about this mystery knight who always wears a mask and won't reveal themselves. And she thinks that could potentially be a magical threat to Arthur, and this knight is more fluid and graceful and fights differently than all of his other knights. So the cool twist there is that it turns out that this mystery knight is actually a woman, and it's Lancelot, and I loved that, a recasting of a traditional character as female, and she's a fantastic fighter, so breaking lots of tropes and stereotypes there. Lancelot goes on to save Guinevere's life, so that was great, but there's kind of a growing the character Mordred, who we're introduced to early on, is kind of constantly trying to get the romantic attentions of Guinevere, who is legitimately in love with Arthur, but then she also ends up being a little bit in love with Mordred too, and then there's almost a little hinting of maybe she could be interested in Lancelot very far down the road. And it's just like, no one needs that in like a book this short. It just was too much. And the Mordred part was maybe okay because he was, he did end up betraying her in the end. He's a slimy character, and he's supposed to be, according to legend. So you do kind of expect that. But the way it was done was still just, I don't know, to me it was just a little too slimy to be truly believable. And there's a moment at the end where she has to choose between Arthur and Mordred, and it's been built up that she actually has like a romantic spark with Mordred that she doesn't quite have with Arthur. It's almost more of like a duty over love kind of thing, and she chooses Arthur. And so that casting of it didn't really jive with me. The fact that she then, yeah, if that makes any sense, that she then had to make a choice and was forced to choose kind of a duty situation over a love situation. It just, maybe in a longer book, it could have been fleshed out more. And then the final thing at the very end, the big twist is that, oh, after all, the Guinevere imposter isn't actually there to protect Arthur. The reason Merlin sent her away and sent her to Arthur was because she's in danger from the Lady of the Lake, I think. It actually wasn't even quite clear, but it's like she's in danger and was sent to Arthur for protection. And Arthur was in on it the whole time, even though the whole time he's been being very supportive of like her role to protect him and, you know, listening a little bit to her feedback about how to protect him better. And it's just like that twist. I mean, in a YA novel, if you're going to flip the trope to, you know, turn a stereotype on its head and have this princess be the person who's supposed to protect the king and is the only one who can do it because she has special powers, like, you gotta embrace that and stick with it. And then to flip it back to like a typical damsel in distress storyline, I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, oh my gosh. And so I know, so I did do this as part of a buddy read with some folks over at Megan's Reading Revelations, and Megan didn't finish this. She DNF'd it at, I think she said 85%, so like about when all these twists were starting to happen, and it was clear that the story was like not going to go to a good place. And I don't blame her. I did finish it, like I said, because the writing and the story really had grabbed me, and I just really needed to know what happened. But I will not be reading the next books in this series. This is supposed to be the first in a trilogy that's current. So I think the second book might have just come out, and there will be a third book, and I am not going to read them because I was here for the female protector and it was taken away from me. I feel betrayed. So, okay, those are my spoilers for the Guinevere deception. I'm sure there are other things that I could talk about, but I think I've been talking long enough. So if you want to read a book with a cool premise where you'll enjoy 50% to 2/3 of it and then get really mad at it, this book is for you. And I ended up giving it 4 stars on Goodreads because I always round up, and so I ended up giving it 3.5. Because I grade on enjoyment, and I really enjoyed the couple of hours I got out of reading the first 2/3 of this book. Like, loved those hours. So anyway, Guinevere Deception by Kiersten White. Now you know. Thanks for watching. If you've made it to the end. If you like what I'm doing here, please hit the subscribe button, leave me a comment, leave me a like. If you've read this book, let me know what you think. I could very well imagine mixed reactions to this book. I would love to hear from people who loved it, and find out what it was that really, you know, drew them in, and what they thought about the ending. I assume anybody watching this probably won't read this book, but yeah. Anyway, all right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.